This is a procedure on tearing apart a GE pitch motor and replacing the bearings.
The tools required to do this is large socket set, large Allen head set, both metric and standard, a dead blow, bearing puller, ball peen hammer, rubber mallet, tweaker, snap ring pliers, needle nose pliers, and a flathead.
The PPE required for this job is steel-toed boots and safety glasses. Rated Z87.
To clean your motor, you will need cleaning solvent and paper towel.
Start by removing the 3 bolts that are located on the brake. Use an Allen head wrench for this.
Now take the 4 screws off your spacer ring, which will allow you to push your brake pad off.
Also, pop off the black cover.
After you get your 4 screws pulled out, use a bearing puller to pull off the spacer and the brake pad at once.
Loosen the set screws on the gear to remove it from the shaft.
Now take your bearing puller to remove the gear off the shaft.
Using 2 flathead screwdrivers, remove the clip from in front of the encoder wheel.
Now with your hands, pull the encoder ring off the shaft, should slide right off.
Using a flathead screwdriver, pop the keys out of both sides of the motor.
Now on the back plate, remove all the bolts.
Remove the bolts on the front plate of the motor as well. There should be 4.
Remove the bolt holding the PT100 with a breaker bar.
Remove the nuts off of the 4 brass bolts on the outside of the motor and then push them through.
Now using a large bearing puller, crack off the front housing, should pull right off the shaft.
Do the same thing to the rear cap on the motor.
Now remove the rotor out of the housing.
Use the bearing puller to remove the bearing off of the shaft.
Now using snap ring pliers, remove the snap ring holding in the bearing.
After you've removed the snap ring, flip this piece over. Use the rubber mallet and the dead blow. Place the rubber mallet on the top of the bearing and slowly hit it with the dead blow, pushing it out the bottom side.
Place the bearing in the correct place. Take your piece of wood, rubber mallet, and your dead blow and hit it evenly until it is flat with the housing. The other bearing, heat up to 250 degrees and slide onto the shaft.
Using a flathead screwdriver, pop the spring off that holds the brushes in place. Be sure not to touch the brushes with your fingers.
After sliding the rotor back into the housing, putting the back plate on, now you will take longer bolts. Put the brush part over the shaft and evenly tighten these.
After the front plate is sucked on, put in your normal bolts as long as they can reach and tighten them down.
Place your key in and tap it down with a dead blow.
Be sure to put the springs back on the brushes before starting the motor. Also, reassemble the encoder wheel, the gear, and the spacer on the front of the motor using the previous steps.